quizzes, they called it. And they would come with some kind of a little test, and that you would take the test and it would tell you what type of person you were and who you worked better with. They could figure out so much from you from your answers to that test. And there was a guy in my that I worked with who I just detested. I mean, seriously, I just detested this person. And oh, by the way, welcome everybody on YouTube. Here you're with Bruce Rawles and Lynn Johnson, and we're going to be reading Absence from Felicity by Dr. Kenneth Wapnick. I'm just telling a personal story here as I was trying to log in. But anyway, it turned out that this person that I absolutely detested and thought was the most just rude and ignorant and just a horrible person. We took those tests, and he and I had the exact same score. I mean, it was like we were the same person, personality test wise, and I had to think I was, I was pretty shocked by that because but then I realized that, I, I was really like him a lot, but I was just more attractive about it. I was more subversive about it. So, anyway, and that's that's how good those tests are. And of course now, Jesus would tell me, "Oh, that was your reflection of yourself." It was exactly right because that was what you saw of yourself. And anyway, so it's hilarious. All right.
We
So
all project what's in our minds, huh?
exactly, exactly. And oh my gosh, I mean, you cannot believe the things that I did to try to, I mean, we both try to sabotage each other all the time, in various ways, throw each other under the bus. And I mean, we're just like, it was like a little war that went on in this place. It was just so crazy because all we were doing was writing, we were doing um writing technical manuals. So there you go on how to build nuclear weapons. So anyhow, okay. So you want to pick up where we left off, and because I think
Sure,
a
sure,
better idea.
sure. As always, well, at least for the last year plus, I think now. Now we're about halfway through. We are reading from The Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. And as we've kind of been noting pretty much every week, the first read through was like, oh, what a great story about the lady who scribed the course. Now it's like, what a great story about the resistance that we all have. And of course, Ken's brilliant commentary on how we can overcome that resistance by trusting Holy Spirit and applying what the course suggests. So I have us on the bottom of page 267. And I'm going to back up one paragraph as we often do to kind of a little overlap so we can make the flow seamless for people who have been following along uh, continuously. So this is basically something in the previous paragraph. It says, Jesus then commented, through Helen's channeling, of course, you had a lot of trouble afterwards with the words which are essentially irrelevant. Interesting synchronicities. I'm going to be talking about the introduction in the first section and the clarification of terms right after this. So, well, by the way, I'll need to leave about 5 minutes early because of that, but
Oh,
today.
good.
But,
Okay.
but uh, uh, it's never about the words. It's always about the meaning behind the words. So anyway, I'll start that paragraph over again that Jesus is commenting. He says, you had a lot of trouble afterwards with the words in parentheses, which are essentially irrelevant in close parentheses, partly because you were dissatisfied with yourself at the time, but also because you are confused about the difference between perception and cognition. You will note that we have said very little about cognition, in brackets, later corrected to knowledge, close bracket, as yet. And then side is in parentheses here. Um, one of these exceptions is in the correction formula for fear, which begins with know first, that's K-N-O-W first. in parentheses. The reason is because you must get your perception straightened out before you can know anything. So with that preface of Jesus' comments, now Ken comments, this again underscores the basic process of healing that A Course in Miracles sets forth. We are not to focus on the truth, i.e. knowledge, but rather on undoing the illusions by correcting our misthoughts or misperceptions. That is why, for example, Jesus spent so much time in helping Helen and Bill understand their mistakes. Once understood for what they were, these errors could be corrected by Jesus as Helen and Bill would turn to him for help. And that's why, there's just, my commentary here. It seems like that's why some people complain that there's so much emphasis on the ego in the Course, and we don't really need to affirm the truth because the truth doesn't need, a relief agency uh, or any kind of rescue effort because the truth is all there is. And it's us that believe that there's something other than truth that need the help. And the help that's needed is to undo the barriers in our mind that we've made, the blockades and the lasers and guard dogs and hurricane fences with concertina wire over the top that we've put in the way of the truth in our mind, metaphorically. Right.
Yeah, you just described where I used to work
Well, what do you know?
with the
Yeah,
concertina wire and everything.
yeah. There you go. There you go. Yeah, well, the defenses do what they defend, right? So
That's
anyway,
right.
but even if with or without working in a nuclear facility, as my dad did, and I know we've talked about this before, we all have that nuclear part of our mind that is, our defenses on steroids, that we think that there's something that needs to be defended, and of course the only thing that we think needs to be defended is what we made up. And so when we can see that clearly without the ego muddying the waters, we can see that we really made up nothing. But that's one of the last things egos want to admit, and so that's why it's so heavily defended. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because otherwise it would just be collapsing like a bunch of broccoli
Or a house of cards
or a house of cards.
with house of cards with little pieces of broccoli printed on each card. How's that?
There you go. All right, you want to continue reading?
Sure, sure. The notes for chapter 3 continue, and then Jesus interprets the following regarding Bill and Helen. And here's the two-paragraph quote. Perception, miracles, and doing are closely related. Knowledge, and this sounds like it's right out of the early text in the Course. Knowledge is a result of revelation and induces only thought. Perception involves the body, even in its most spiritualized form. Knowledge comes from the altar within and is timeless because it is certain. To perceive the truth is not the same as knowing it. That is why Bill is having so much trouble in what he calls, quote, integrating, unquote, the notes. His tentative perception is too uncertain for knowledge because knowledge is sure, as in steadfast, unyielding, immutable, unchangeable, relentless. Right? Okay. Your, in brackets, Helen, perception is so variable that you swing from sudden but real knowledge to complete cognitive disorganization. That is why Bill is more prone to irritation, while you are more vulnerable to rage. He is consistently below his potential, while you achieve it at times and then swing very wide off the mark, or wide of the mark. I don't know. I guess it works either way. Actually, these differences do not matter. But I thought you might be glad to learn that you are much better off with different perceptual problems than you would be if you suffered from similar ones. This enables each of you to recognize, and this is the right word here, that the misperceptions of the other are unnecessary. It is because you do not know what to do about it that Bill reacts to yours with irritation and you respond to his with fury. Well, they're kind of highlights Jesus's distillation is probably a simplification of their persona differences there, but I think we can kind of all relate to both those personality types, the overtly aggressive and passively aggressive, for example, and all that kind of stuff. But either way, aggression implies I'm making duality real, right?
Right. And it's really uh therapizing. Is that the word?
I
Helen.
guess.
He's being her
Sounds good. I
therapist.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, sure. Why not?
He's being her therapist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he's explaining to her the psychological reasons that she's doing what she's doing and that Bill is doing what he's doing,
Right.
so that she can recognize that this is not just, I'm irritated with you and you're irritated with me, that that they actually have a purpose for that irritation. So
And
uh,
and the purpose being to look at the facade and see through it with Holy Spirit or Jesus's help. And because if we just look at it and stop there, then we tend to think, well, that's as much as there is to this person, instead of realizing, well, no, I feel like through and beyond the facade of the body and the persona, then we see the spirit, and we see the spirit as the same, and that sameness is what makes the breakthrough to ultimately to oneness. But even just a little bit of momentary now and then aha moments of realizing, well, gee, this person who I think I disagree with, and like your personality test of your coworker, it's like, well, we're really the same. Well, what do you know? Maybe I could go a little easier on them, and by extension on myself, right?
no, that made me even more mad.
What do you mean we're the same? How dare you insinuate?
Like I said, I just thought it was more attractive in me. So, oh gosh.
Gunmetal more attractive?
Yeah, exactly. Uh, let's see. Okay, where did you leave off? Okay,
We observe.
all right, where is that? Okay, you want me to read now? All
Sure, go for it.
right, and you said you have to leave about 5 minutes early today.
Yeah, right, give or take. Yeah. Huh?
We'll try to be aware of that.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right, so we observe again Jesus's emphasis on the great learning potential found in Helen and Bill's relationship. Regarding Bill's punning ability, Jesus had these loving words to say. What man perceives as its, in brackets, knowledge, into brackets, what man perceives as its attack is his own recognition of the fact that it can always be remembered because it has never been destroyed. This is not a literal remembering as much as a real remembering. And that in parentheses says that is largely for Bill. I wish he would decide to use that talent of his constructively. He has an idea of how powerful it could be. Actually, it does come from the unconscious and is really a distorted form of miraculous perception, which he has reduced to word twisting. Although this can be quite funny, it is still a real waste. Maybe he'd care to let me control it and still use it humorously himself. He doesn't have to decide it is one or the other. And wow, so he's kind of scolding Bill, it looks like here a little bit, but just saying, you're misusing your your mind by using it to make puns that don't point out the truth of whatever is being said. I don't
Yeah.
know. What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. And I have a very, personal connection to this paragraph because I come from, uh, both sides of my family. I engaged in a lot of wordplay, and my mom was a tremendous punster, and my dad and her family was basically school teachers and that kind of profession, and as well as my dad's side of the family, to a good measure, and in that latter case. In Boonville, California. My grandparents grew up there, and in that community, they around the time they were living 125, well, 100 plus years ago, let's say, put it that way. Um, the people who lived there had developed an entire language called Buntling that they could use to in this little remote valley in Northern California, about a day's journey, but by horseback, I think, or days or two. Um, in the early days, they were somewhat isolated, and so it was shearing sheep and growing apples about all there was to entertain themselves. So they made up a whole language. And when city slickers from San Francisco would come come to town, they could carry on an entire conversation without uh, the newbies knowing what the heck was they're talking about. And so when I was a kid, I heard little dribs and drabs of that being spoken by my elder relatives, and it was quite entertaining. I still remember a few words of it, but I digress anyway. But
No,
but
no,
yeah, but the
fascinating.
whole thing about punning though and wordplay is so I've kind of come by that naturally, and I enjoy it very much. But I've noticed over the years, um, my wife in particular has pointed out that I have, like Bill, have used it at inappropriate times that would distract and or divert, important conversations. And I think I have used that in retrospect in ways that were disruptive because I was afraid of the closeness or the shared interest that would have been connected in my mind and people in the conversation. Um, and I think I've learned to a certain degree to recognize that and moderate that and then use it when it's appropriate. Um, and so yeah, I can very much relate to this.
Yeah, and actually, it's a coping mechanism, and
Yeah, yeah,
that for
yeah.
me, because I do kind of similar things, because
Mhm.
I am, believe it or not, you know me, you've talked to me, I talk to people all the time. I am socially really awkward, and if I'm not with people that really know me or friends or in a group or a crowd, I don't know what to say, and I realize my whole life I've always been that way, and whenever we would go as a family to a party or anything. I would always just find a book and go sit in the corner and read because I didn't know what to say to people and was completely um I don't even know how to describe it. It was like they were
Introverted.
yeah, introverted for sure. But
Yeah.
it was like they were like aliens. It's like,
Hmm.
these people are not like me. I seriously had this notion that they were not like me. And because they couldn't, I would say things and they would look at me like I had just, dropped a turd in the middle of the floor or something. I mean,
From
that's
Mars.
Mars, yeah. And
Right.
and so I realized at a very early age that I can't trust myself in public to say, the right thing or, not say something stupid. Um and I mean I'm not the only reason because obviously I'm not that way. Obviously I am, pretty eloquent and have, great ability to communicate. But
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
just, what I'm talking about. So we
Oh,
can
absolutely, absolutely.
and
Yeah,
so
I'm reflecting on a college class that was required for my engineering degree. They wanted us nerdy types to have some kind of humanities balance, and so one of the classes that was required was Rhetoric 1. And I remember when I stood up in front of the class to give a speech on an assigned topic, it was like, okay, well, I think I got a passing grade, which I did, but it was you know it's the enthusiasm and the motivation I think that makes all the difference. And then I think the next assignment or subsequent anyway was pick a topic that you find interesting. And I was just wild about the Great Pyramid and all the fascinating geometry and geologic and physics and all kinds of stuff that the mathematical proportions and whatnot that were encoded in the pyramid because having read a book called Secrets of the Great Pyramid by Peter Tompkins and finally um, I planned to go in 73 but ended up going in 92 to visit the pyramids and along with my wife and my mom, and there was 21 of us in the party. Anyway, we had a great time. And but even in my college days, I was fascinated by this and made a little scale model of the Transamerica Pyramid in San Francisco and then one of the Great Pyramid at Giza. and out of cardboard and had them sitting on my teacher's desk as visual aids, and I was drawing all kinds of little facts and figures on the whiteboard and or chalkboard, I guess it was at the time. And the instructor said, "Wow, if you keep this up, you got an easy A." But again, it's a motivation. It's like, if you're enthused and inspired, because I think of myself actually as an introvert too, but when I start talking about the course, I just, he can't shut me up
Yeah.
basically, because it's just, to me, it's like that's our way out,
Yeah.
of insanity.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that we absolutely, I mean, it calls to me. This is like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh,
yeah.
this is exactly right. So,
Uh,
but anyway, that was very interesting. This is I don't think unusual. I don't think it's
no,
unusual.
I don't
And
think
and
it is at all. Yeah.
yeah, no, and a lot of times people will say, oh, maybe you're a little autistic. Well, maybe so. That's a possibility and probably a good probability. What does that mean? It just means that you don't think the way other people do. Being a little neurodivergent is not a bad thing.
Yeah. And then from early age, people say you ought to do this and you ought to do that. No wonder we're autistic, right?
We're all on it. Yep. All right. Why I oughta. All right.
Speaking
So
of inappropriate puns, right?
I love it. Okay. So Bill's class. Next followed an extensive discussion, primarily aimed at Bill, regarding a class in abnormal psychology he was scheduled to teach at the undergraduate campus of Columbia University. Bill always had a morbid fear of public speaking up, although he was indeed an excellent speaker, and he was panic-stricken at the thought of this upcoming class. Jesus attempted to help him with this problem, and many of these notes were later kept in the text itself, primarily in chapter 4. Bill subsequently was not able to teach the course himself, but Helen accompanied him and they taught together.
I've
Wow.
forgotten about this part. Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh, there's a bunch of
Hmm.
stuff. Me, I was talking to Mickey the other day, and she was telling me all kind of stuff that's in this book I completely forgot. So this is great.
Good that we're rereading it, isn't it? Yeah.
It is absolutely. Uh, so much of this extensive dictation is included here in order to show, as in the previous notes, Jesus's persistent and loving teaching in the early weeks of the scribing. This part of the dictation, incidentally, appears to have been taken down without shorthand notes, dictated by Helen directly to Bill. At least the notes do not survive. So we have another one of those where she just dictates directly to him and he types it up.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay, so at least the notes do not survive if there are any. This was written on December 7th, 1965, and began with the discussion of Bill's relationship with his parents. So here is Helen speaking, Jesus through her. As you, Helen, have so often said, no one has adopted all of his parents' attitudes as his own. In every case, there has been a long process of choice in which the individual has escaped from those he himself vetoed while retaining those he voted for.
Mhm.
I vetoed and voted. Bill has
Appropriate for the election year that reminds us that we're electing one of two thought systems 24/7, right?
exactly, it's just perfect. Bill has not retained his parents' political beliefs, in spite of the particular kind of newspapers that constituted their own reading matter in this area. The reason why he could do this was because he was believed he was free in this area. There must be some acute problem of his own that would make him so eager to accept their misperception of his own worth. This tendency can always be regarded as punitive. It cannot be justified by the inequality of the strengths of parents and children. This is never more than temporary and is largely a matter of maturational and thus physical difference. It does not last unless it's held on to. This is an extremely important point. The past is not to be seen as determining present problems.
Mhm.
This is a crucial theme in the course's later teachings, aimed at freeing us from the chains of the past. Thus, the mind's power, I guess this is Ken speaking here. I keep, because I don't get the indents like you do there. Or
Right.
they're not as obvious. Okay.
Yep.
Thus,
Yep.
the mind's power to choose in the present is given great emphasis. As indicated in the first sentence, this was a principle used by Helen in her therapy to aid patients in understanding that they need not be prisoners of their past, since they have been the ones who selectively, though unconsciously, chose which of their parents' attitudes to be bound by. They are the ones who now can choose again. All right. And then is this okay? The notion of choosing the present to be bound by the past is elaborated on now by Jesus in the context of Bill's relationship with his father. All right. When Bill's father came to, this is Jesus speaking again. When Bill's father came to his new office and quote unquote destroyed it, it is quite apparent that Bill must have been willing to let it be destroyed. The many times that he has commented on this event alone would suggest the extreme importance of this misperception in his own distorted thinking. Why should anyone accord an obvious misperception so much power? There cannot be any real justification for it because even Bill himself recognized the real problem by saying, quote, how could he do this to me? The answer is he didn't. I just want to stop here for just a minute
Mhm.
because Jesus is
Nothing
telling,
happened in truth, right? But
yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just saying nothing happened in truth, but that probably wouldn't have been helpful at the time to skip over the steps of looking at the disappointment and the anger and whatever else was going through Bill's mind about his father, right?
Right, and that
Yeah.
he told this story. This is we I just had another meeting where we were talking about people telling stories over and over and over again about their upset or disappointment or something that went wrong in their life. And the answer is just the same thing. It didn't happen. It,
Hmm.
he didn't. Your father didn't do that to you unless you are your office, unless you are the pictures on the wall or the
Hmm.
items on the desk. He didn't, Bill didn't, or not Bill, Louis didn't put his dirty socks in Helen.
And the bread box story, yeah.
The red box story, he didn't do it but she took it as personal to her. You know,
I'm laughing because my cat just stuck her head in a paper bag that's on my desk. Speaking of messing with the desk items and office items.
oh man, cats are
You probably
so
can hear
funny.
that. I don't know. There's a little paper bag on my desk.
Oh, that's
My
hilarious.
bored cat is wanting something to play with, I guess.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, it's like cats are so much fun.
Hmm.
So yeah, so he didn't do this. Okay. And then Jesus continuing, and this is of course words Helen is speaking out to Bill, apparently, because there's no notes. Bill has a very serious question to ask himself in this connection. We said before that the purpose of the resurrection was to quote demonstrate that no amount of misperception has any influence at all on a son of God. End of
Hmm. That's really powerful, isn't it? That one sentence. No amount of misperception has any influence at all on a son of God. Tag we're all it, and therefore nothing that anything, nothing, literally anything that seems to happen in the world can have no bearing on the eternal perfection and innocence of our being that we all share. End of
exactly.
statement, right?
Yeah, I mean that is a um it's a guarantee and knowing it as a guarantee, I mean this is one of those things that it's not a guarantee because God's going to make things better for us. It's a guarantee because that's the only possibility that's real, is
Hmm.
that we are invulnerable and invincible.
Yep. Anything that seems less than that perfection is really just a correctable error in our individual minds. And the fact the individual mind is the source of the error because we think we've split off from perfect oneness.
Yeah, and it's just so crazy because, then, we run away with the story, or the story runs away with us, whichever
Hmm.
way it goes, we're just running away. So either way, we're the ones running away.
Yep.
So Ken continues, this statement goes to the heart of the course's teaching on forgiveness, namely that no one has the power to take away the peace of God from us, regardless of what they do or think. Later, Jesus would teach regarding his crucifixion, quote, the Prince of Peace was born to reestablish the condition of love by teaching that communication remains unbroken, even if the body is destroyed. End quote. Now, from text chapter 15, section 11. So, uh, yeah. So the message for Bill continues. This demonstration, this is still Jesus talking to Bill through Helen.
Hmm.
This demonstration exonerates those who misperceive by establishing beyond doubt that they have not hurt anyone. Bill's question, which he must ask himself very honestly, is whether he is willing to demonstrate that his parents have not hurt him. Unless he is willing to do this, he has not forgiven them. I mean, this is a key thing right here to forgiveness. As long as you keep remembering the hurt and thinking that it's real, you have not forgiven. That's it's that I mean, it's so simple. Okay,
If
so
we're breaking the continuity of sameness between ourselves and others, we're we're essentially saying, I don't forgive. And since there's only one of us, that means I don't forgive myself ultimately.
yeah, and therefore, I deserve to be punished, and then I'm gonna make sure that I get that punishment. I mean, that's the craziness of it. Is we're crucifying ourselves. Hey, how about that?
Needlessly,
Needlessly.
pointlessly, silly, so
Oh,
silly.
that's a Tori Amos song too. Why do we crucify ourselves every day? I crucify myself because nothing I do is good enough for you. I crucify myself. That's it. We're every day crucifying ourselves. Little song break there. Okay, the essential goal of therapy is the same as that of knowledge. No one can survive independently as long as he is willing to see himself through the eyes of others. This will always put him in a position where he must see himself in different lights. Parents do not create the image of their children, though they may perceive images which they do create. This is huge too. However, as we have already said, you are not an image. If you side with image makers, you are merely being idolatrous. And seriously, I'm just going to highlight this because that is huge to me.
Mhm.
I mean, the idea that that I'm not an image.
Right.
We're not an image.
Images, idols, reflections, those are all substitutes for our identity that we don't even question if they're as good as the real thing because we don't even believe there is a real thing for the
Yeah,
most part.
exactly. Exactly. We don't even understand that there is something else, that there
Hmm.
can be something else, another way, another way of being, another me, although we know it or else we wouldn't be looking for it here.
Yep,
So
exactly.
we know it's there. So
Some level.
okay, so Jesus continues. Bill has no justification for whatever for perpetuating any image of himself at all. He is not an image. Whatever is true of him is wholly benign. It is essential that he know this about himself, but he cannot know it while he chooses to interpret himself as vulnerable enough to be hurt. This is a peculiar kind of arrogance, wow, whose narcissistic component is perfectly obvious. It endows the perceiver with sufficient unreal strength to make him over and then acknowledges the perceiver's miscreation. There are times when this strange lack of real courtesy appears to be a form of humility. Actually, it is never more than simple spite. Wow. And
Mhm.
I'm just going to read what Ken says and we can talk. What is meant here is that the ego first arrogantly believes it can make over what God created. This is why I'm not a body, I'm free, I'm still as God created me.
Mhm.
Substituting its image for the self with a capital S, and then humbly, quote unquote, humbly denigrates the shabby self it has made, believing it to be real. Wow. What do you got to say about that?
Um, we've yeah, settled for a pretty shabby self-concept, haven't we?
Oh man, no kidding.
But we think it's cool to be separate. So it's maybe it's the shabby chic. That's a phrase that comes to mind. I've heard uh, somewhere in so, something must have seen on TV or something. But
Oh, Mickey has her hand up. Hey, Mickey, what you got to say about it?
I I just love this, and you know, Ken was so advanced as a therapist. I mean, unbelievable. He was already definitely living the course before
Mhm.
the course was written. So thank you. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mickey.
Thank you, Mickey.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have such an, tremendous gift in the profound, prodigious, and prolific work of Ken Wapnick, don't we? It's just wonderful that we get to benefit from all this. And I suppose one could say, well, it's because each of us have chosen to be living in this time and put ourselves in a position where we were exposed to and drawn to Ken's work. But all the same, I'm still really grateful for Ken. So doesn't really matter in the end, does it? But yeah, what a tremendous uh, depth and breadth of insight we have available in his work.
No, it's like we really, really needed it.
Oh yeah, and I'm finding that I put on my ear pods and go for a walk for an hour and a half or so in the mornings, and it's like that's my recalibration time. Like the course says, set the day right, um, get up before the sunrise, and get my dose of kin to kind of stay aligned, and that works really well. But and then throughout the day, as much as I can, just there's so much wisdom in his work. So
Yeah, I could see, I look out, go outside at night and look to the south towards Arizona, and I see a big bright glow where you and Mickey and all these other people, Sharonda, there's a bunch of people that live in Arizona that are doing this practice. Of course, I see it everywhere. So,
yeah, it's not a geography thing.
no, it is not. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is just, I mean, the almost kind of a scolding that Jesus is given to Bill, and basically saying, you have no business thinking that you know this, because you don't know anything about yourself.
Well,
Uh,
it's also the false humility. And the flip side of that, of course, is what we truly are. Um, we denigrate that when we make differences real. And so it's no matter how the ego approaches it, it's going to get it wrong because its whole purpose is to subvert, sabotage, and disrupt the peace in order to have this, perturbation and perfect oneness um, that we call an individuality, and yet nothing happened. But because we want that to be real, we go out of our way to make the distortions and the disturbances and the upsets real. But we have to just notice that we set it up, and when we realize that there's no blame that can be rightfully ascribed to anything outside our own mind, and that we made it up, and that it's not making us happy, if we put those ingredients in the pot and stir and realize, well, gee, what am I doing this for? Maybe I could forgive everything and wake up.
yeah, I'm doing it, and I went over to the exactly as you're saying. I'm doing it to myself.
Yeah.
And the
Secret of
footnote here
salvation.
says, in other words, we alone are the determiners of our self-image. Hey, did I hear that today already in the lesson? Others may reinforce it, but the responsibility nonetheless rests only with us.
Mhm.
So it, it's, I'm the one who makes the choice. And, I'm honestly, when I think about it, I've been studying the course for a long time. I know you have too, and a lot of other people that I know have as
About
well.
40 years actually this month.
Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? But
Yeah.
but think about it. How long did it take for me to come to a clear understanding that what's being said here is the case? And here he's like the first year talking to Bill and Helen, like, all right, you guys, um, here's the truth, and you have a choice. It took
Hmm.
me a long time to realize I have a choice, even though Jesus told it to me over and over and over and over. So, anyway, any other thoughts on this?
Oh, I think a lot of it's self-explanatory, but yeah, certainly I'm glad we're going over this again because it really, either all the personal material for Helen and Bill, really, as we're noticing, it's we can generalize it and realize, yeah, it applies to everyone. We're all doing silly things to short circuit our peace, and although the specifics vary widely, the content is always the same. Like it says in one place in the text, the problem isn't one of concentration. It's the belief that, no one, including ourselves, is worth the effort. We've got such a distorted self concept because we think that we can have a self that's separate from everyone else and from our creator, that just that very premise is going to um, be an unending cause of disquiet in our mind.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, that's again up to us. So, do you want to read?
Sure, sure. Let's see. Did we read the what is meant here?
No, Jesus now is where we start. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The shabby self. Yeah, we did that. Okay. So Jesus now continues, addressing Bill directly through Helen. Bill, your parents did misperceive you in many ways, but their ability to perceive was quite warped, and their misperception stood in the way of their own knowledge. There is no reason why it should stand in the way of yours. Well, there's that, responsibility that comes through once shining brightly once again, huh? It is still true that you believe they did something to you. This belief is extremely dangerous to your perception and wholly destructive of your knowledge. This is not only true of your attitudes toward your parents, but also your misuse of your friends. You still think that you must respond to their errors as if they were true. By reacting self-destructively, you are giving them approval for their misperceptions. Well, I think that describes much of human psychology, doesn't it? And certainly the course's recognition that we project onto the world, often and typically starting with our biological parents and family, and extends outward to community and globally and then beyond, I suppose. And we want to make sure that everyone knows that we're not responsible for our lives, so that we have an seemingly unending supply of alibis, excuses, and justifications for our misery. And that doesn't really make us happy.
No. And it's so funny because I know people who are like going back into their past and look, what did my parents do to me? What did my mother? She was neglectful. My father did, I mean, really, um, none of that actually happened. And I mean, I know Course in Miracles students who are like really into, let's heal this inner child and go fix these broken parts and all that kind of stuff. And the what Jesus is speaking out right now through Helen to Bill is you think that what your parents did to you was real. And you think that you have to respond back as if it really happened.
Mhm.
And by reacting self-destructively, you are giving them approval for their misperceptions. That's pretty
Yep. Yeah, and we're part of the problem, but the only problem is that we believe that we could make up a thought system that was problematic. So
Exactly. Exactly. And we can't. We don't have, that's arrogant to imagine that we could do that too,
mhm.
that I could overturn heaven. And isn't that what happened with Lucifer, or how Lucifer ended up in so much trouble? Because
I don't know. I was absent that day, I think. So I played hooky. I yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stories, but they're all made up, right?
Exactly. Okay, so you want to continue reading?
Sure. In other words, in giving the attack thoughts of others power over our minds by virtue of our being hurt by them, we demonstrate that their perceptions were correct. We could not feel vulnerable and hurt unless we first believed that our sins deserve such punishment. Thus, we're giving approval to the attacking perceptions of others. This inevitably reinforces their own guilt over harboring such thoughts in the first place. The lesson continues, and I'm going to pause here just because the word feel is italicized in what we just read. Um, I've been musing on something, a phrase that came into my mind, well, more than 4 decades ago, because I was in high school, and I remember writing on computer paper, taking some programming classes. I had all this, miscellaneous stacks of fanfold tractor feed computer paper in those days. You're probably familiar with that, Lynn, I imagine. And
Absolutely.
and so I had my mom's black poster paint, and I wrote in big black block letters, "I am choosing to feel this way." And I've probably told the story before, but um, I, I thought, well, just everything I've been studying, even in my early metaphysical studies in high school and college years, kind of like, well, this seems to ring true. And so I just put, made this a little, I suppose at the time as an affirmation. And when I tried to use it that way, um, on days when things seemed to be going right, I'd look up at the ceiling, toward the ceiling, which is where I had attacked, right below the ceiling. And I'd look up there and say, yeah, I'm choosing to feel this way. Yeah, cool, right. It's working. And then on days when things didn't seem to be going well, and I was either angry or depressed, or one of the many not so wonderful thoughts or feelings going through my mind, I'd still look up that thing toward the ceiling, and it says, I'm choosing to feel this way. And I'd have to tell myself, damn it, that's still true.
Yeah.
And that's when it really had its beneficial effect, which I think is analogous to why there's so much emphasis on undoing the ego and looking at it without trying to change it, without trying to fix it, without trying to dynamite it away or shout it down, just looking at the ego without condemning ourselves for choosing a silly, as Ken describes it, a maladaptive solution, which then uh, made up a non-existent problem. So well, the non-existent problem is really the ego mind, and the maladaptive solution is the world that we use to try to escape from it, which never works, of course.
No, and causes nothing but havoc.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So,
All right. So the lesson continues. Were you there?
sure. Let me flip the page here. No, page 272. And now in channeled words, no one has the right to change himself according to different circumstances. Only his actions are capable of appropriate variation. His belief in himself is a constant unless it rests on perceptual acuity rather than knowledge of what he is. It is your duty to establish beyond doubt that you are totally unwilling to side with, and in parentheses, identify with, anyone's misperceptions of you, including your own. Well, there's another very powerful statement of, you know, these words I don't think are in the course anywhere exactly like this, but in so many other ways they are in the sense that, we just have to notice that it's our thoughts about everyone else that really are just reflections and projections of our thoughts about ourselves. And so that's where the unconscious
I
is,
sit down. Sorry.
oh, that's where the unconscious is reflected in the world and gives us an opportunity to see what's going on there. Otherwise, it would be, forever hidden and therefore unhealed. So,
Exactly. And we do that um uh even the tiny little things. So that's why we're being asked to look at our thoughts. Just look, look, look. And uh that's that's the work of the course.
yeah, look, wait, and judge not, right?
Exactly. And the judging not is the most important. So,
Yes, because we can beat ourselves up mercilessly if we acknowledge the ego and then say, yeah, and I'm a horrible person for choosing this. Well, it's just we're afraid. It's we're not evil, sinful, or wicked, just silly, as Ken points out. I think that's such a helpful phrase. It's a forgivable mistake. We're afraid of the love that's behind the resistance, whether the resistance takes the form of trying to lighten, uh, you know, considered and thoughtful looking at the ego by making puns, or uh, conversely, taking too seriously what really is laughable, or any other combination or permutation of not being willing to look at the absurdity of the ego and see that as having had no impact and no effect on our real being.
yes, exactly, exactly. And you can see that if using true perception.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, so Bruce, I know that you gotta go. I want
Yeah, I'm
to
gonna I'm
mark the
gonna
page.
sign off for now, and I've got it marked as well, and look forward to picking up next week where we left off. And it's always a delight and a joy to share this hour with you, Lynn, and those who are joining with us. Thanks so
Thank you.
much. Have a great week. Yeah,
All
left
right, I
off.
love you, brother. All right.
Likewise.